Audio Jungle.
Hi everyone. So in this video we are going to talk about denial of service or DOS. So denial of service is actually an activity that is performed by attackers to make a particular machine or a server unavailable to their intended users. For example, consider you own a website. It could be a commercial website or it could be an e-commerce website. So these attackers actually make the server which is hosting the website unavailable so that the visitors cannot visit your website. So basically in this video we are going to talk about how to do the DOS, how usually attackers perform the DOS, and what are the usual ways to prevent the DOS. So consider you have a server and which is serving a website 123.com. Okay, so now when the attacker wants to create a denial of service, they would send so many requests to the server. So basically when we have a server which is hosting a website, the server has a certain capacity to handle the request, right? For example, this server might have a capacity to handle some 100 requests per second. That could be the capacity of this particular server. But when the attacker tries to create a denial of service, they might send more number of requests which the server cannot handle. Like they might send some 1,000 requests per second or 10,000 requests per second or even more than that. So at some point of time, the server cannot handle so many requests and it might crash or freeze to death because there is no enough memory or enough CPU to handle the request coming from the attacker. So the problem here is when the attacker attacks the server and brings it down, any other genuine users cannot reach the server. So if it is an e-commerce website, nobody can purchase any products, or if it is a banking website, nobody can make any transactions. So any genuine users will also get impacted. So usually attackers do this to damage the reputation of the brand. It is usually carried out by the competitors or any random attackers. So how do we usually prevent it, right? So one common approach to prevent it is to scan the request headers coming from the request. So for example, whenever we browse a particular website, we browse it from the browser. And the browser usually sends a particular header in the request, which is called user agent. So every browser will send some value in the user agent header when it sends a request to the server. But when an attacker creates the denial of service, they don't do it from the browser because it is humanly impossible to create millions of requests from the browser to create a DOS, right? So they usually write a kind of a shell script or a bash script to create more number of requests to the server. So when writing such kind of script, they might be using some kind of a library. And that library or the shell script might be sending some different value in the user agent, which the application server can scan and identify whether it is a genuine request or a malicious request. So that is one of the common approach. But this is a very basic solution because nowadays the hackers are very smart enough to manipulate the request headers to make the request look like the genuine request. So this is just a basic solution. And another approach to prevent DOS is to put one more server in front of your application server. And this server we can call it as firewall. So this firewall server will keep monitor the request coming from the users, and then it will scan the request, and then it will decide whether to allow the request or deny the request to the application server. But how does the firewall do that? How it will make the decision, right? So the firewall will check if the number of requests coming from the same origin, which is coming from the same IP address, within a certain period of time is more than the certain threshold, then it will decide it is a suspicious request, it is a malicious request. For example, if the number of requests coming from the same IP, the IP could be like some let's within some 5 seconds of time is greater than 1,000. Consider hypothetically if the number of requests coming from this particular IP within 5 seconds is greater than 1,000, then the firewall will identify this as a malicious request because it is humanly impossible to create that many requests within a short period of time. Users cannot do that, right? Only the scripts can do that. So that is one of the approaches that firewall servers use to identify whether the request is good or bad. And then once the firewall identifies that, it will block this particular IP so that this particular IP address cannot reach this application server. So this is one of the another popular solution the firewall server will use to identify the DOS. And there are many cloud providers who usually provide a service called Web Application Firewall, which we call it as WAF. So WAF is one of a popular service given by most of the cloud providers. So WAF supports many number of features, like it prevents the cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and DOS is also one among them. So you can make use of the WAF feature in any cloud providers to prevent DOS, or we can have our own firewall server to prevent the DOS. There is one more type of DOS which is called distributed denial of service, which is also called DDoS. So this is even more dangerous because in case of DOS, the attacker is actually sending more number of requests from a single IP, so it is easy to identify the IP and block it. But in case of DDoS, usually the request comes from different IPs, so it is very difficult to identify whether it is a genuine request or a malicious request. So we will talk about DDoS in a different video. So I have put some more video reference links in the video description. You can take a look. Thanks for watching.
Audio Jungle.